good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. We're gathered here on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 7, and I also want to acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. I am grateful to all of the many stewards of this land that came before me. My name is Sarah Elmeligi, and I am the MLA for Banff-Kananaskis and the Alberta NDP Critic for Environment, Parks and Tourism. I am joined here today by Janis Irwin, the Alberta NDP Critic for Housing. Alberta is facing a terrifying housing crisis that is impacting each and every community, and it is especially prevalent in Banff, Canmore, and the surrounding area. Not only is housing becoming completely unaffordable, but there just isn't enough of it. For the town of Banff alone, it is estimated we have a shortfall of approximately 1,000 units. As a resident and representative of these great communities, it has been so disheartening to witness the impact of this housing crisis on families and our economy. Banff and Canmore continue to face one of the worst staffing shortages in Alberta, largely because staff working in the area cannot find affordable housing. Even worse, folks who have called the Bow Valley home for years can no longer afford to do so and are being displaced from a sustainable future here in the Bow Valley. It has been recently announced that the federal government will invest $4.6 million into the town of Banff to build 120 new units over the next 3 years, as well as supporting the town in implementing an array of housing solutions. The town of Canmore has also applied for similar federal funding and is hopeful for a positive response. While these actions are promising, it doesn't guarantee that current residents of our communities will be able to stay in their homes now and in the coming years. And despite the federal government stepping up to support the Bow Valley during this housing crisis, the provincial government is nowhere to be found. The UCP's lack of investment into affordable housing is costing our communities greatly. It has increased homelessness, it has put the economy of Banff-Kananaskis at risk, and it means families can't afford to buy homes or even stay in the town they're living in. Affordable housing cannot wait, and it baffles me that the UCP continues to drag their feet on this issue. Instead, they've turned their focus to steamrolling municipal decision makers in order to barrel forward with the Three Sisters Mountain Village property development, a project that has been met with significant local opposition, not only because of how the decision about these lands were made, but because of the possible strains this could put on roads, pathways, hospitals, fire halls, and more. And the UCP is moving forward with this plan while not offering any affordable options for the residents within the project. The TSMV development provides thousands of homes, but only 10% of those currently planned meet the needs for affordable housing. Canmore has so few affordable housing provisions, and a project as significant as TSMV needs to include more affordable options within it, or the housing crisis in Canmore will get worse. I am all for developments that help our community grow sustainably. Not only does the TSMV exacerbate our housing crisis, but it is being done despite expressed disapproval from local residents. The UCP government needs to stop and listen, because their priorities are all wrong. An immediate and effective affordable housing strategy is critical to the health and safety of our communities and the growth of our economy. I'll now turn it over to Janis Irwin to talk about the Alberta NDP's response to this crisis.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for being such an incredible advocate for the people of Banff-Kananaskis. For months, Alberta has been consistently seeing the steepest rent increases across the country. We've heard from Albertans who are experiencing rent increases of 20, 30, even 50%. No one can afford rent increases of this magnitude. This is forcing families to stretch their household budgets to the breaking point. It's forcing families to choose between putting food on their table or heating their home. And it's forcing residents of Banff to live in overcrowded homes that fail to meet health standards in business. Despite the evidence, the stories, and the displacement of so many Albertans, this UCP government refuses to action any initiatives, programs, or policies that will keep those Albertans housed. Instead, they focus their attention on policies that could actually harm Albertans. We're just days away from the UCP announcing their 2024 budget, and in their latest fiscal update, they were on track to miss their housing targets by 4,000 units this year alone. And just last week, Premier Smith announced that Albertans that we're going to see the purse strings tighten in this coming budget. And that will likely mean that the investments we need to make in housing will continue to be kicked down the road by this government. No more broken promises. No more ignoring the outcries of Albertans. We need action now. This is why the Alberta NDP, we've brought forward Bill 205, the Alberta Housing Security Act. This bill will establish a temporary emergency rental cap, which will alleviate the wild pressures caused by rental increases. This bill also calls for increased reporting on housing targets in order to hold this government accountable and to also increase the housing starts we need. This will ensure the government sets housing targets every year and details its progress. Not only will Bill 205 provide renters with immediate relief, it will take a tremendous amount of pressure off of business owners here in Canmore. Canmore's housing crisis has become so dire that employers have to provide employee housing if they want their business to even have a fighting chance. This shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the responsibility of employers to provide their employees with a place to live. So by ensuring that housing remains affordable for renters and that new housing targets are set, Bill 205 will see to it that folks can afford to live and to work in Canmore without employer-provided housing. And every person who calls Alberta home, now and in the future, deserves a safe, accessible, affordable place to live. And after consulting with so many Albertans all across this province, I'm confident that Bill 205 will bring the swift action that is necessary during this unprecedented housing crisis. And with that, both Sarah and I are very happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you, Janis and Sarah. So we'll now go to questions. Just a reminder for those joining us on the phone lines to use *9, and for those joining us on Zoom to use the raise hand function to get into the question queue. We'll first start with any questions in the room. All right, with no questions. Oh, yeah. Please.
Thanks. Greg Colgan from the Rocky Mountain Outlook. Probably more for Sarah on this one, but in regards to the comments that you made on Three Sisters, are you essentially asking the UCP to review what the court decided, or to review that from potentially not happening again to another municipality? What would kind of be your hopes for that?
So as we know, the ASPs for Three Sisters have been approved, and that has gone through a legal process. Our town council is honoring that legal decision and is moving forward with those ASPs as proposed. What I'm asking for is, and I've had some conversations with the developer about options to potentially increase affordable housing up there. I know they're talking about that, and I look forward to continuing those conversations. There is also still a lot of local concern around that development and what it will do for town, and if it is actually addressing the housing crisis at all. What I want the province to do is to acknowledge that that development has great potential to change our community, and that community members are still wanting to be involved in solutions and conversations around that. So I would like the province to engage our community in more thorough consultation around those ASPs. And I also have raised concern around Clause 619 in the Municipal Governance Act when a council makes a decision that the province can overturn that. I think that that is potentially problematic for rural communities across the province, and it would be good to review that Clause 619 and see if it can be improved to serve rural communities across Alberta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just in regards to the affordable housing, obviously in the ASPs it stipulates at least 10%. There's the bonus density aspect that could go up to 20%.
Yeah.
Is there kind of an ideal number that you see as being good for the community within that would also work for the developer, you think?
I haven't thought about an ideal number. I think that's something that could come out of those conversations with the developer that I do look forward to having. I think also when we're talking about a development that size of TSMV, it's also the order in which things are built, right? So we need affordable housing now. I would really like it if the affordable housing units were some of the first units built up there so that we can start addressing this crisis more meaningfully as soon as possible. So again, that's conversations that I'm open to having with TSMV, and we have met several times and we will continue to do so.
All right, thank you. We'll now move to questions online. Our first one is from Catherine. All right, Catherine, your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So I asked Minister Nixon about this earlier today, and he said if Canmore wants affordable housing projects, then they're going to have to approve projects and not shut down existing ones. And he said if they keep acting the way they're acting, they're not going to be on the priority list for funding. What would you say to that? That he thinks that council's actions are where the bottleneck is?
Thanks, Catherine. Great question. So my initial reaction is that I think that Minister Nixon is potentially confusing where the concern around some housing developments is coming from. So the Canmore Town Council has approved the ASPs for the Three Sisters Mountain Village development and has approved ASPs for other developments in Canmore that also provide affordable housing. So when it comes to TSMV, the opposition is really coming from local residents and local organizations. Town Council is honoring their legal obligation to approve those ASPs. I think that's really important. The other part of this, I would say, is that Town Council is also working on a design for another housing development on the north side of the Trans-Canada Highway on the Palliser lands that would provide a tremendous proportion of affordable housing units. And the province could also play a role in supporting construction of that, which would definitely help to address our affordable housing crisis here in town. So I feel like Minister Nixon's comments are inaccurate at best, inflammatory at worst, and don't accurately portray what is actually happening in the Bow Valley. So I invite Minister Nixon to come to Canmore anytime and meet with Town Council and myself to talk about the details and the nuances of these. I'd also just add that Canmore and Banff together provide billions of dollars to the provincial tourism economy every single year. And we keep doing that regardless of the housing crisis that we're in. And so this housing crisis actually has implications that extend far beyond the local economy and the local sustainability of Canmore. It actually has the potential to affect the millions of visitors that come here every year.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, and in terms of employers providing housing, that sounds like it's reinventing company towns. I'm wondering, does there need to be any labor protections, any changes to labor code to prevent kind of exploitation of workers who are dependent on their employer?
Feel obligated to provide employee housing. We definitely saw during the pandemic some of the challenges that happen when employees lose their jobs and suddenly also become out of a home. I think it really exacerbates the housing crisis that we have here. When I talk to some of our biggest employers in the Valley that are in the financial position to provide employee housing, they feel fortunate that they can do that, but at the same time, they'd much rather focus on their business than be obligated to provide employee housing. So it really is the hope of businesses that the community has sufficient housing, that they could just focus on their business and people would have somewhere to live. We only have employee housing because there's not enough housing in the community, and employers feel the need to step up if they're going to retain staff over the long term. And so the root cause of that problem is actually just a lack of housing units available in the community. So I'd really like us to focus on that rather than in putting employers in the position where they feel like they have to provide employee housing to retain staff. And I'll also just add that the employee housing, the housing crisis, is not only affecting transient or temporary workers that come through our town, it's affecting nurses and teachers and doctors and people who hold really foundational positions in our community. And if we can't attract new nurses to live and work in the Bow Valley because they can't afford a place to live, that obviously has really big trickle-down effects for our healthcare provisions and the health of our community in general.
All right, one last pass for questions. All right, and with that, that concludes our press conference. Thanks, folks.